Hi, friends and family. This week is my spring break. It doesn't feel like vacation because we're all confined, forced to stay home to save lives. But I wanted to touch base with you as we are going back to school next week to continue distance learning. I'm not sure about the situation in other parts of the country, but in Illinois, the governor has issued an extended home shelter all the way to April 30th, which means that we are going back to school possibly in May, maybe June, or maybe not at all. I have different regions in this country where I have colleagues all over who are not going back to school at all, not going back to the building, and will be forced to do some distance learning all the way to the end of the school year. Today, I want to discuss about a very interesting topic that includes all languages, which is standards. Standards and specifically resources on how to assess progression when you're learning another language that is not your native one. I'm going to share my screen because I would like to use the American Council of Teaching Foreign Languages, ACFEL, which is a leading organization for all world language teachers. So if you are one, you know what I'm referring to when I talk about the 5 C's. 5 C's are the standards by which you're going to evaluate progression. You can see that all the 5 C's are interconnected. They are part of that language circle. And in the middle is the big C, communication. Communication is production, is the most visible way you're going to assess your progression. If you are able to speak, I think that's the big one. Everybody, when learning another language that is not your native one, strive to want to speak. Not so much, I never heard somebody said, oh, I want to be able to read French. You want to be able to communicate, and by communication means the speaking part of it. Communication is the triangle, it's the center of really the communication. But around are different ways to assess your progress. You have the interpretive way through which you're going to assess through reading and listening. You have the presentational, how you assess your progress through the speaking and the writing, and of course interpersonal when you're doing a lot of communication. Around the big communication are other circles that are going to gravitate around the production, the communities, cultures, connections, and comparisons. All those circles are going to work the same way regardless of the language you are learning. And when I say learning, I should say acquire. A natural acquisition of the language will be my next topic next time when I discuss about comprehensible input, which is a new approach, I would say more progressive approach, not as traditional about learning a language. And my school is having a big push about comprehensible input. The way we assess the language through those different circles are through the culture. Culture is a big one for me because I'm a French native. So it seems a very obvious, logical way to introduce the language through the culture because I can speak about my French culture. For me, it's so important that the language and the culture go hand in hand together. Students need to understand the context. It's evident that when you're learning a language, you need to be able to apply the language outside of the classroom. That's why I have a French club. That's why I have guest speakers coming. That's why it's important that students understand that language is spoken somewhere else outside of France. When I say culture, I will introduce, for instance, Belgium in 3rd grade. I will introduce French Impressionism in 4th grade. So they understand that besides the language, there's a cultural component that comes into the acquisition. Connection is also very important because, especially for young learners, they need to be able to connect the dots and understand that the language makes sense in other subjects of their life, especially academic subjects. So for instance, in 3rd grade, if I'm going to introduce the weather unit, I'm going to do it through the 50 states. Why? Because 3rd grade is learning about social science and they are introducing the 50 states. So it makes more sense for them to understand how to apply weather in French through the 50 states, which is a social science geography, because they can connect it together. They can connect world language with art, collaboration of world language with drama, music, art, social science, history. All those collaborations seems a stretch, but on the other hand, they are very evident. and I strive for that. So at my school, I love to collaborate with my colleagues and apply some connections because it is so much easier for students to be able to get out of the classroom and see how they can apply the language and the culture in other areas of the academics. Comparisons is also a big one as they progress through their acquisition of the language. Students who learn another language that is not their native one tend to score higher on their native language. Studies shows that if you are an English speaker and you're learning another language, whether it's French, Chinese, whatever language, you tend to score higher on your native language because your brain is already conditioned. Your brain is already open to receive another language. So you're going to absorb one language, two languages, you are working the same part of your brain. You're going to compare your native language to another one. So that makes complete sense because you are using that same part of the brain. This is scientifically tested through reading, through writing, through basically interpersonal skill. And the last one is communities. That may not that may be an intriguing one. Why do we need to talk about communities when we learn about a language? Because when we learn a language, we tend to see our local circle. How can I apply the language in a way that makes sense for me when I step out of the classroom? I will take my 4th grade to the Art Institute because we are learning about French Impressionism. And as we know, the Art Institute is the largest museum in the US outside of France with the largest Impressionism collection. I'm going to have a community outreach with project-based service with maybe some local organizations that require some French speaking, or I will bring some guests coming in that are going to have some local outreach. I will have a virtual partnership with my French school in Paris because it's important that French students in middle school understand how students in France live and learn the country. So here you have it, those 5 circles of life, the ones that apply the standards, the ones that are going to put the language outside of the classroom, see the progression, also motivate the students to learn. It's impossible in 1 unit to apply those 5 C's, but you want to strive for it. You want to make sure that when you create your curriculum, you always have those 5 C's in mind because your skills are going to apply for it. Next time, we'll be talking about comprehensible input, which is a natural acquisition, a natural language acquisition of how do we learn, how do students learn another language that is not their native one. But today, I wanted to have a quick preview about the World Language Standards. So not just French, but any language that is not your native one. So remember the 5 C's for my teacher friends, but also parents or anybody who is curious and intrigued about learning another language. I hope that you stay safe and healthy. Enjoy your spring break, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.